Call the Port Commission meeting to order. We open the public meeting at 2 o'clock. We immediately recess to an executive session to discuss a real estate transaction and some pending litigation. And we're now closing that executive session and reconvening the public meeting. And our first item is roll call.
Commissioners, if you would please answer when I call your name. Commissioner Briscoe?
Here.
Very good. Commissioner Robbins? Here. And Commissioner McCauley?
Here.
Very well. We have all three commissioners participating today. Commissioner Briscoe is joining us via the phone today.
Okay, very good. Our next item is the announcements of our advisory committees. And on July 13th, we're going to have at 9:30 in the morning at the ARF building will be the Technical Airport Advisory Committee meeting. And that same day at 5 p.m. in the same building will be the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, or the BIAC. Our Marine Advisory Committee is taking the summer off, but they'll meet on the 12th of September, Tuesday, here in this room. And with that, we'll move into our public comment period. And if you could please go to the podium for the public comment so we can make sure we see it and hear it on our video. Our first person is Lori Province.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for opening the public comment session. My name is Lori Province. I live at 2501 West Street, Bellingham, the neighborhood just up the hill from us here. And full disclosure, I am a Port Marine tenant and have been for about 20-some years. I'm just rising today briefly to remind the Commissioners that there is a development agreement between the city and the port, as you well know, and that Section 5, I think, B of that agreement says that new port tenants, you should be looking for people who are high skill, high demand, paying high wages. And in order to do that and not disproportionately create a high end and a low end, I just wish to bring to your attention that presently there is a port tenant who is lowering the standard of wages in the economy in the development area. Hilton Avenue is in fact in the development area, and that would be Bornstein. So I'm just asking you to think and positively reflect on any conversations that you might have, any sentiments that you might have toward high wage, high jobs, economic development, since you're the economic development ADO of Whatcom County, that also means current port tenants as well. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Our next one is Maria, is it? Jimenez.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maria Jimenez. My English is not really good, so she's gonna help me. Soy empleada de Bornstein. Vengo aquí con algunos de mis compañeros.
I'm an employee of Bornstein, so I'm coming with some of my coworkers.
He trabajado ahí por 17 años.
I worked for Bornstein for 17 years.
Ahorita estamos en problemas por la renovación de nuestro contrato para el trabajo.
Right now, we're having difficulties because of our renewal of our contract.
Ha estado muy difícil. Nuestros jefes han retirado nuestra pensión.
It has been very difficult. Our bosses have withdrawn our pension.
No nos dijeron que la retiraron, simplemente la retiraron.
They never informed us that they had removed our pension. They just removed the pension.
Es casi un año que no nos están poniendo dinero en la pensión.
It's been about a year that they haven't contributed into our pension.
Estamos en la mesa negociando. La verdad no quieren apoyarnos, no nos quieren dar un contrato justo. Están muy por debajo de lo que en realidad es. Creo que trabajamos muy duro y merecemos que se nos dé un contrato justo.
So we have been at the bargaining table and they're not giving us a good contract or languages in our contract. We work very hard and they're lowering our standards.
Necesitamos el apoyo de ustedes para
We
a-
need,
a
we need your support
poder lograr lo que sea justo.
so we could get a good and a just contract.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next one is also Maria Garcia.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Maria Garcia. I'm sorry, I speak English too much.
I'll be helping out again.
Yeah. Yo trabajo para Boston por 16 años.
I've been working for Bornstein for 16 years.
Teníamos una pensión que nos retiraron sin avisarnos, nos dejaron prácticamente sin nada.
We had a pension that we had, and then they just removed it and left us without anything.
Con una aseguranza médica que nos están queriendo subir a un precio más alto del que podemos pagar
They're trying to raise our healthcare costs with a higher premium that we cannot pay.
y con un sueldo casi un poquito más arriba que el mínimo.
And our salary is a little bit above minimum wage.
Yo pienso que todos los que estamos aquí sabemos que hoy en día los costos de todo prácticamente van cada día para arriba.
We probably all know here in the room that the cost of living goes up every day.
Y que lo poco que ganamos pues prácticamente sería para nuestro seguro médico, que es algo esencial que todos necesitamos.
And basically, our earnings would just go to our health insurance to be able to pay for that.
Yo estoy aquí en compañía de mis compañeros representando a los que no pudieron venir para pedirles su apoyo.
So I'm here supporting my coworkers for the ones that couldn't come, asking for your support.
Estamos haciendo todo lo que podemos para que nos ayuden. De antemano, gracias por escucharnos, por estar aquí.
We appreciate your support and thank you for being here and listening to us.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Jeff. Midoff. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Midoff. I represent a small group, or a group of citizens living in South Hill, but all over Bellingham, and the groups includes Bellingham taxpayers within earshot of the railroads. And our group has been working on the governmental implementation of a quiet and safety zone through Bellingham again, and we thank the port, the staff, the commissioners for your support. First, we appreciate your efforts in getting the funding into the proposed 2018 budget. We know it's a start, and you have a lot of steps left in that budget. We're going to be here all the way through that process in support of your efforts. We urge the port to initiate the notice of intent with the Federal Railway Administration and the State of Washington's Utilities and Transportation Commission as soon as possible. This is the first step to instituting a safety zone for your crossings. And we wanted to make you aware of the UTC decision on the Yacht Club Drive crossing in Whatcom County on May 10th, 2017, if you aren't already aware of it. The UTC supported the county's use of lower cost barriers to meet the standards of a quiet zone under the FRA regulations. This is a positive decision for safer, cost-effective crossings in our community and we urge the port to follow this example of working with citizens and other partners to achieve safer crossings. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Jeff. Next one is, looks like Miguel. Miguel?
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Gracias por darnos la oportunidad de estar presentes aquí.
Thank you for having the opportunity to be present here today.
Mi nombre es Miguel Melgarejo y trabajo en Boston.
My name is Miguel Margadejo, and I work in Borstein's.
Ahí tengo 9 años trabajando también ahí en Boston.
I've been there for 9 years.
Y estamos aquí para ver si nos pueden apoyar o ayudar en algo para pelear para un contrato justo.
We're here to try to see if you guys could help us fight for a fair contract.
Porque en realidad el contrato que ellos quieren hacer ahorita, las propuestas que están en la mesa, no son justas.
Because in reality, the proposals that are on the table right now are not just.
Y como ya dijeron mis compañeras también, son costos muy grandes que ellos quieren ponernos en la aseguranza.
As my coworkers had said earlier, the cost of our health insurance that they're trying to bring on to us is a lot.
Y el salario también es muy bajo el que nos están dando.
And our salary is also very low.
Y eso es lo que estamos aquí tratando de que a ver si nos pueden apoyar en algo.
And that's what we're asking for you guys' support.
Y gracias por darnos la oportunidad de estar aquí.
Thank you again.
Thank you. And our next public comment is from Maria, another Maria. Velazquue. Okay. And then, so we have a Betsy Hernando?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm with an organization called Jobs with Justice, and we support workers' rights, and we are part of the Blue-Green Waterfront Coalition. And I'm here to speak to you as a community member today to support the Bornstein workers. The port is the economic development entity for our community, and we feel in Jobs with Justice it's not simply enough to support jobs. What we really need is living wage jobs. If any of you attended the housing forum held by Bellingham City Council about a week ago, you learned that rents have grown exorbitantly in the past 2 years, and it's very difficult for people to afford an apartment. In addition, healthcare costs have gone up a lot. I really support Bornstein being on the waterfront. These are the very kinds of jobs Jobs with Justice wants to see there, jobs that are marine related, and that's wonderful. But we also want to see jobs that provide people with a living wage, affordable health care, and a pension so that they can have a dignified old age. And you have standing as elected officials. We ask you to use that standing to talk to Bornsteins and encourage them to settle a just contract for these workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the last speaker is Carol Jacobson, it looks like.
Good afternoon. When I just had legal immigrant status, I would not have had the courage to come forward and speak to a body like yourself. So I am truly impressed and made aware of the difficulty it was for these people to come forward today and speak in their native tongue to you. I'd like to make some comments. I am also a member of Jobs with Justice and the Blue-Green Water Coalition. And I want to say that neither the county, city of Bellingham, or the Port of Bellingham has ever managed to regain the number of blue-collar living wage jobs lost when Georgia Pacific closed. However, all three institutions agree that the brownfield under the Port of Bellingham's auspices needs to be cleaned up and provided living wage jobs. The Port of Bellingham Master Development Plan, developed before the pre-2009 recession, is oblivious to what the community and county needs and favours a realty development in the form of a hotel, boutiques and condominiums with a foreign, not local, developer. The residents of Whatcom County, however, see the OGP site as an opportunity for living wage jobs and not minimum wage opportunities as a housekeepers, waitresses, retail assistants, gardeners or cleaners. With a minimum wage, low-wage employees struggle to pay the rent. Currently in Whatcom County, a medium income earner, not a low-wage earner, has to pay 34.7% of income on rent, and that's a higher percentage here in Bellingham. A family can pay in Bellingham up for childcare up to $1,100 a month, 5 days a week, that is. So it is especially disturbing when Bornstein's Seafood, an established business, is setting an unacceptable example on the waterfront. To keep labour costs static, Bornstein is nickelling and diming its workers, having ceased to make payments on the pension fund and proposing increased workers' contribution to healthcare to offset the costs of not a living wage, but a little more, but a wage a little above minimum wage. Bornstein's labour dispute is a poor example of acceptable labour practice at the waterfront. This labour dispute provides an opportunity for the Port Commissioners to return the waterfront to its former glory of providing jobs with a living wage and fair labour standards for blue-collar workers.
Go ahead, continue.
By means of a labour community agreement that covers the basics, a living wage, health benefits and a pension written for the workers on the waterfront, the port can regain the economic leadership and walk the talk of livable working standards, especially in this election year. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's everyone that signed up. Is there anyone that showed up here that didn't get a chance to sign up that wants to speak? Very good. We'll move on to our next item. And our next item is our consent agenda. Diane, if you could, please.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through G. Commissioner Briscoe, can you still hear us?
Yes, I hear you fine.
Great, thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, any discussion on the consent agenda? Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
I think he has nothing. Okay. I really don't have anything on this agenda that is of question, so hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Our next item is a presentation. Tamara?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tamara Sobczak, Director of Finance. As you know, we recently wrapped up our annual audit, and we've got our audit team here to discuss what they looked at, what they found. I'd like to introduce Dina Garza. She's the audit manager. Arden Flores is the assistant audit manager. Scott Hilton was our auditor in charge this year. He was here pretty much every day for several weeks. And then Rochelle Young is in the audience, and she was on staff as well. So I'll hand it over to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. As the manager, I do want to direct your eyes to our packet from the Washington State Auditor's Office with current elected official Pat McCarthy on the top. What this will walk us through is the scope and the results of the audit. It does include our draft reports, which we will be releasing. We want to make sure that we're presenting them to you for any concerns before they're released on our website. You will also see throughout our presentation that it was a very clean audit, and we do really appreciate the continued cooperation and great relationship we have with the port in that case. But we'll be able to go in detail to the different areas that we looked at. And really the hope of our office is to help governments work better, cost less, and increase the public trust. And we really feel like the different scope of our audit, which we'll go through, helps that because you can be able to say that a third party is looking at all of your operations and the processes you're putting in place and agreeing that they are very strong controls. So with that, I will hand it to Scott, who will go actually through the scope of our audit and start with going through the reports.
Thank you for having us today, Commissioners. And first of all, before I get into the meat of the reports, I'd like to just extend my thanks to a few members of your staff where Tamara, and I was glad to see that Valerie showed up here as well, and also Anthony Amorati, the contracts administrator. That I wanted to extend our thanks to them because even though we talked to a lot of people throughout our audit, they spent a lot of time with us. And like she said, we were here several weeks, and Valerie was even dealing with me weeks after I was off-site. So it was very helpful to get their help throughout the audit. They got us stuff fast, and that helped us get the audit done quickly. Now I would like to direct you to the audit scope, and just the main thing to see here is that a lot of people think of audits as just a financial statement audit, where we are performing, this year, we actually performed 5 separate audits and assessment procedures. So the first one I will talk about is the accountability audit, and in your packets, there's a tab there for accountability report. And I'll have you flip in a couple of pages because the first couple pages are just the cover letter and the table of contents, and then on page 4 actually has the results of the audit. And the results in brief, like Dina said, are very clean. There were no findings or management letters, and that's what we like to see through our audit. And then just a little explanation as how we select the areas for audit and accountability audit. We're looking at state laws, internal policies, best practices, legal compliance with grants, contracts, things like that. And we chose these 4 areas because we can't look at everything, and we like to look at things that are either affected greatly throughout the period. Our period was January 1st through December 31st, 2016. And the first bullet down there is the procurement, and where the port is handling a lot of large projects and also small projects throughout the year. We audit that because for ports especially, there are a lot of restrictive guidelines that we looked into. So we looked at a lot of different sizes of projects that were procured and didn't have any significant issues there. Self-insurance is the next bullet there, where we have to look at that every couple of years as a state law. And the port self-insures for healthcare and also dental and vision, I believe. And there are no significant issues in that. And a lot of this stuff throughout the audit, we'll communicate some things we think are maybe best practice items. And there were things in there that we communicated and had discussions about, but like I said, again, nothing significant. The marinas and moorage, we looked here at Squalicum and also up at Blaine Harbor for cash receipting. Also looked at the different agreements and also making sure that nobody was stealing moorage from you guys. So one thing we do like to do as well is make sure that the port is getting all the revenue that it's owed, and so that's part of our audit as well. And then contracts and agreements take that into account as well. So we looked at some specific contracts and agreements, and not everyone, not all of them, but we didn't find any significant issues within that either. Are there any questions about what we looked at through the audit?
Commissioner Briscoe, any questions or comments so far?
No, I have none.
Okay. Again, this is just the accountability audit report. On the next page, on page 5, it refers to the financial audit that we will talk about next, along with the federal grant programs and other reports where we looked at the passenger facilities charges as well. So with that, I will pass it over to Arden Flores, who is the assistant audit manager on the audit for the financial audit report.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I just want to reiterate what Scott said about giving our appreciation to port staff, notably Tamara and Valerie. For somebody that's been here for a while, they do make our job a lot easier. So if everybody would flip to the financial single report tab. Again, I think this is about last year is when we started bringing these audit reports to these commission meetings. I guess they just for everybody to see. I think sometimes we just say, okay, it's a clean report, but I think it's also a benefit to everybody else to see how we say it on our audit reports as well. So as you can see on the table of contents, we have several reports in here. So I wanted to start talking about the first one. So on page 4, you'll see that report is the schedule of findings and question costs. The advantage of this report is actually summarizes all the other information in the other reports as well, so we don't necessarily have to talk about those reports. So this is the, again, schedule of findings and question costs. So financial statements, this is how we say we have a clean audit report. So we issued an unmodified opinion. That is a clean opinion. It means that your financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. One thing that you'll see consistent in all these audit reports is a reference to internal controls and compliance over laws and regulations. The difference with government auditing standards when compared to standards in the private sector is we always have to evaluate the internal controls and compliance over laws as we're designing our tests over your financial statement numbers. So there's going to be consistent reference to those. Standards also require us to present to the board if we find instances of significant control deficiencies and material weaknesses. So now, having said that, that's why we're saying here that for significant deficiencies, we reported no deficiencies in design or operation of internal controls, and no deficiencies, material weaknesses, and no instances of non-compliance that were material to the financial statements of report. So a clean audit opinion on the financial statements. And as far as the federal awards section, for our review of the port's federal awards, we actually audited the Ports Airport Improvement Program, the CFDA 20.106. And again, the same results. Basically, it's a clean opinion. Basically, we're saying we reported no findings that are required to be disclosed in accordance with the Code of Federal Regulations that are stated up here. And again, the same thing with our government auditing standards, no significant deficiencies in internal controls and no non-compliance with laws and regulations. So that is basically what summarizes this first report here. Any questions? Maybe I think I might have been talking a little too fast there, but.
Commissioner Briscoe, do you have any questions?
No, I have no questions.
No.
Okay, great. So let's flip over to the next report on page 6. And again, like I said, this is the actual internal control report and compliance report. So what we did here is we just highlighted the portion that is relevant to, mostly relevant to the port. So as you can see, we highlighted here, this is the internal control and compliance report over the financial statements. So we highlighted during the audit, we did not identify any deficiencies in controls that are material weakness and no instance of non-compliance as well. This is going to be the kind of the theme with the next report as well on page 8. So this is the independent audit reports on compliance for your federal programs. And as you can see here, what we've highlighted is, again, the clean opinion on the major federal program, which is your airport improvement program. In our opinion, the port complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on your airport improvement program for this year. Clean report there. If nobody has any questions there, I'm going to flip to the page 11, which is, this is the agreed upon procedures where we audited the port's passenger facility charge program. This is an audit that we've done every year because of FAA regulations for this particular program. And again, this, as you can see, because this audit is done in accordance with government auditing standards, we have to consider the internal controls and compliance. And again, we were summarizing our opinion here. The Port of Bellingham complied in all material respects with the requirements referred to above that are applicable to its passenger facility program. And again, highlighted on the next page is we did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls over compliance that would be considered as a material weakness. And then last, if not, but certainly not the least, is the final auditor's report on the financial statements. And again, I won't spend too much time on this report anymore because it's already summarized on the first report, but we have highlighted the actual opinion there on the financial statements. that we've already discussed. So that is the summary of all our reports that we're going to be publishing on behalf of the port on your website. Any questions on these reports that we discussed?
Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
Okay. One last thing that I want to bring to your attention is if we can flip to the last tab here for the accountability report. This is the Port of Bellingham's IDC. So there hasn't been that, because the IDC is a separate local government for the port, and now it just has very little activity over the last 3 years. I think there used to be 2 outstanding revenue bonds out when we were auditing it. Now I think there's just one BB-Pay's revenue bond that's been paid off. So this I think there's only 1 outstanding. So I think our plan for here is just to review the IDC every 3 years. And so this is the report of this is the result of our review for this year. And basically, just to summarize what we did here, just the IDC, you comply with all its reporting requirement, and the port is collecting the fees that you're supposed to be collecting. It's supposed to be 1/10 of 1% of the outstanding bonds. And so just to summarize this report, again, this is a clean report. Port's doing what it's supposed to be doing based on this report. And so again, the resulting brief is based on the procedures. Nothing came to our attention in the areas we reviewed that caused us to believe that the corporation was not in substantial compliance. Basically, that is how we're saying that the IDC is also a clean report for 2014 and 2016. So basically, our plan is to look at this from an assessment standpoint every 3 years because it's a separate local government. So that summarizes our report for the financial statements in your federal programs.
Commissioner Briscoe, any questions?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll give back to Scott has one. Sorry, go ahead.
I can save these, but I do have a question on page 15, if I may.
Sure, yeah.
So on the, under other matters, excuse me, under other matters, you've highlighted part of a sentence about applying certain limited procedures on the required supplementary information. Can you explain why that was highlighted and why you pointed that out?
So we do give required supplementary information in this particular report refers to the port's pension plan information. And so there are those reports that we don't give an opinion on. So just like we do give a clean opinion on the rest of your financial statements. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're referring to here. So it's a limited procedure because we don't necessarily give an opinion on it.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Hopefully that clarifies it.
All right, and I would like to have you guys turn back to the back of the first page. It's the audit agenda, the exit conference agenda. If you take a second to get back to that point, we have some required communications that we, by audit standards, need to report. And just the first bullet on that page is that there are no material misstatements in the financial statements that were corrected by management during the audit. So there was nothing big that we found that they needed to correct. And we did have one other item.
Excuse me.
Sure.
My stuff is in the parallel. Where are we at on that?
It would be in your attachment. I think it would be called exit conference agenda.
Does it have a page number?
It's the second page of that.
And it would be called, what was it called again?
Financial statement required communications.
Okay.
On the back of the first page.
Yeah, well, I've got it electronically, so my first pages are, I'm not locating. Go ahead.
I'll try to be as descriptive as possible.
There's a box on that page that says financial statement / schedule description, and then it goes on and lists some buildings and structures, values.
Okay, well, I got 63 pages and I'm not locating here. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just the communication here is that there was one item that we didn't correct for the final financial statements because what it entailed is we looked at capital assets, and some portions of capital assets had not been removed when new capital assets were placed into operation. And so, like, let's say if you're replacing a portion of a building or a road or a street or something like that, accounting standards would require that you remove the old portions, so you're not recording depreciation and everything on those portions. So since we could say with pretty strong confidence that this wouldn't have a material effect on the financial statements, because it's fairly small what it would affect, because that stuff is very old usually and depreciated, so the actual value isn't very large, that the error as it relates to the financial statements is so minute that it wouldn't need to be corrected for us to give a clean opinion on the financial statements. So this just summarizes that. Any questions about that?
So for clarification, if
Yes.
I may, if we add on to a building, is what you're saying, an older building, if we refurbish and add on, you shouldn't be claiming or depreciating the old part that you added to?
Right. If anything was removed and it doesn't exist anymore, then it should be removed from the books as well.
Okay.
Does that make?
All right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Thank you.
All right. So the next step in there is just a summary of prior audit findings and management letters. Last year we had a management letter related to financial statement, a misstatement related to the environmental remediation liability. It was a fairly simple error that was easily corrected last year, and so it wasn't repeated again this year. So that we just show it's resolved there. And then finally, I alluded to it earlier before I pass it over to Dina, is that there are exit items that we communicate with management and with staff throughout the audit that relate to more what we liken them to housekeeping type of items. So we didn't bring those to this exit conference because I think they're already corrected in most cases. So, all right, thank you.
So just our final communications is that these reports after this meeting, assuming there are no concerns, will be released electronically on our website. Your main contacts do get a link the day before, and they can be passed on to anybody who is interested in that. There is a link in the system if they want a subscription service to any of the audit reports that our office performs, whether it's other ports, other local governments, et cetera, that those are open to all members of the public and the governing officials. Regarding, there is a section of the audit cost. In our engagement letter, we always have a conservative estimate, and reporting there that our actual audit costs will approximate that amount. We would never go over that without significant conversation because of the efficiencies of port staff. We've never had to. And the final section that you'll see is just our plan for next audit. All of these audits that we've talked about for the port itself, the accountability, financial, federal, and passenger facility charge are annual audits. So we'll be here next year again to perform those. As Arden said, the IDC audit is only every 2 or 3 years, so we'll not do that. And that's, again, for budgeting reasons, a projection on what that cost would be. For transparency, we do say some of the budgets that are in front of the legislature right now do include a state employee pay raise, and that may affect our rate. I do not think it would affect it significantly, but for transparency, we do make sure that all of our governments know that that's a possibility. So that is our presentation on our stuff. Again, very clean, very much appreciate all of your staff and the efforts that you all put in. But again, would like to open it if there is anything that we can answer about our process or anything that we've presented today.
So I'll start. I guess Bobby's delayed. Makes it more sense for me to start. 2 questions for you. One is the next audit is suggested to be about $47,000. That seems a little bit higher than I remember from past audits. What is there a reason that the number is going up?
The number, it is consistent with this year's audit, and what we would always do is look as far as if there are efficiencies lowering the cost. I can look at those specific numbers and report to staff to pass on to you if there have been changes. I'm guessing it's the rate and just the cost of staffing the office, but not any indication of our feelings that we need more budget to perform the ports audit.
Okay, great.
Yeah, a major factor is the federal single audit. When the port spends over $750,000 in federal expenditures, it requires that audit.
Mm-hmm.
There have been some years that has not been required. So that is probably, if you're seeing a very significant jump, it's probably the years that was required versus years that it wasn't.
Okay, fantastic. Because sometimes, someone might see the number going up and think, oh, you're digging a little bit deeper, that takes more time. you're digging deeper because of reasons, but that's not the case.
Not the case, yeah.
Super
And I
good.
can ensure that your staff has that if there's anything different.
Great.
But
So
I-
the other question is, so, recently, this has come up to me personally. So the port has memberships in outside organizations, NGOs, if you will. And how do we ensure that those NGOs are spending those membership fees in a way that's legal? Is it something that we work through your office or some other state office, or is it something internally that we have to manage? Because it's usually not a very large amount of money in these membership fees, but a lot of the organizations that we do belong to do, work that we don't necessarily watch closely, want to make sure that the tax dollars are spent legally.
Yeah, if they're not subject to audit by our office, by the RCW, our focus would then be on what the port's controls are, which is exactly your concern. You could, as part of your contracts, require that they have a third-party audit, and then they would then be required to go find a CPA firm or something like that that can perform that, just because that's, I'm assuming, outside of our statutory authority.
Okay, but the controls would have to be here at the
From our
port.
perspective, that's where we could look.
Okay.
But that could be a requirement that you have of any contractors, that they have to go get that type of audit. And that would be part of the way you ensure that they're spending the funds legally.
Okay. A big one that I think folks may be aware of is the upstream program that was spending federal dollars on billboards and that sort of thing. And those folks ended up in court. So that was kind of a big deal. Definitely want to make sure that we're always safe with those things as well. So.
Right. No, I can completely understand that. And we could work with staff to look into it if they are within our scope. I'm assuming that they aren't as a non-government entity.
Okay.
But
All right. Thank you.
yeah, thank you all very much.
4 years of clean audits, does that mean we don't have to do one next year and we can save $47,000?
Yeah.
Maybe. Don't forget Bobby, my question. Probably didn't ask for it.
We definitely appreciate the port's support and knowing that, like I was mentioning, that we always look at ways to reduce our costs because there are so many efficiencies and strong controls. Also taking into consideration the port's size, and that we do eventually report to citizens, and so making sure that we're considering, but again, being able to confirm that it is very clean, that the controls are very strong.
Hold on for a minute. Bobby, did you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Mike, Commissioner McCauley touched on what I was wondering about, the same thing, how these other groups are spending their money. So that was answered. Thank you.
We can circle back.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the staff for the good work you do. Another clean audit is always nice.
I'm not sure it's the first time ever, Tamara, but it's the first time I remember. There's always been something little. And this year doesn't seem to be even something little.
Well, there was something
There's
little.
something little.
Well,
There are small
but-
things.
but no,
Yeah.
That much credit. There's
always room
something
for
in here.
improvement.
something little that you had, that these audit folks had to tell us about, though.
They have to find something.
They found some things, but they don't have to tell you about those.
Huh. Good work.
So I don't have video, but I saw Tamara Grant.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next item is also a presentation. Brian, if you will.
I think the air quit moving in this room.
Commissioners, Brian Gowron, Director of Environmental Programs. Commissioner Briscoe, I think we had emailed you this presentation as well, so as we're ticking along, if you have a question on which slide we're on, feel free to remind us that you're going along on hard copy as well. So,
Hey, Brian, where'd you get these images?
I'm going to pass this over to, it is actually the folks that are, Alan Birdsall and Elise Cords are actually going to do this presentation in a moment, and they put this one together. I'm just really doing a short introduction on that one. But yeah, this is a brief stormwater program update. Really twofold here as to the purpose of this presentation is really for informational purposes only, no direction or specific commission action here today. But the purpose of it is twofold. One, as you might recall during our quarterly financial reports, every quarter when Tamara provides the quarterly financial report, there's also a slide at the end that has a status of our stormwater program compliance. And we do that for a couple reasons that once I hand this off to Alan and Elise, they'll go into that in a little more detail. But we do that to show the commission quarterly that we are in compliance with our stormwater permits and programs. And that was set up a number of years ago, back in 2007 or 2008, with a previous commission. And we have really, since that time, done a detailed description of our stormwater program. And actually, Commissioner McCauley, during one of those presentations, maybe even a year ago, you had requested that we provide an update such as this. It's taken us a while to get it put together. We were actually on the agenda one time and it got full and we got bumped. So here we are to finally give you your presentation, a presentation on the stormwater program. Then the second part of this is really intended to reaffirm the commission's direction during that time frame when we set some of these protocols up. There was commission direction to ensure that we operated our stormwater program maybe not as cleanly as the auditors just found, but we tried our best to stay in compliance with the stormwater permit regulations, and really just to get some reaffirmation from the commission that that's still the general direction that you're pursuing. And I assume that if you have any questions or comments on that, feel free to chime in here as we go along. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the technical experts here. Alan Birdsall and Elise Cords co-manage the stormwater program in the environmental division, and they'll take it from here. So.
All right, thank you, Brian. I'm Alan Birdsall. With the hat that I'm wearing today is the manager of strategic projects. The way that you see that the stormwater program exists today pretty much has been ongoing and growing for the last 10 years. 10 years ago, the port decided that it was a strategic project, put it in my camp, and then we've managed it since then and transitioning to Elise. Elise and I will be tag teaming this throughout the program, and I'm going to turn it over to her now to really kick it off.
Elise Cords, Environmental Specialist. So stormwater, what is it? Why do we care? Stormwater is precipitation in the form of rain or snow. It contacts structures, surfaces, and can pick up pollutants as it flows. It generally flows untreated to the waters of the state, and it reflects the interface between human activity and the environment. It's personal. Our lifestyle choices impact stormwater, such as how do we get to work? Do we choose to commute by bike, by car, by bus? Our gardening choices impact stormwater, our landscaping choices, our home maintenance choices. It's also professional. Our business choices impact stormwater. Our product selection choices in our businesses, or how we store our materials in our businesses, impact stormwater. Stormwater touches many port projects and programs, from new development to long-term maintenance. The impacts of stormwater. Stormwater is recognized as the single largest source of pollutants to Puget Sound. Contaminated stormwater can degrade water quality, resulting in algae blooms, as we have a local example with Lake Whatcom, where the water treatment plant has been clogged due to the algae blooms. Degraded water quality can cause fish harvest restrictions and also impacts to endangered species habitats. High stormwater flows can cause habitat destruction, flooding, and property damage. And all of these impacts represent widespread economic and recreational impacts to our human community as well. So I'll turn it over to Alan.
That last picture there on Roeder Avenue with the cart, when was that?
I remember that.
Yeah, that was the floods that we had 5-6 years ago.
Wow.
Somebody thought that they can drive through it, couldn't, and the water kept rising.
I want to point out that's not a port vehicle.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it's not.
I think that was my car. But that was a storm event with a high tide.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Like from a pollution standpoint, it may be something we can solve, but there's nothing we can do about high tides and storm. So.
That definitely makes it more difficult. So stormwater regulation, why, other than it's part of what we do, why do we care about stormwater? Well, it's regulated on the federal level, and it's under the 1972 Clean Water Act. And yeah, and so it's called the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. And that permit program addresses the water pollution by regulating point sources that discharge pollutants to waters of the United States. And point sources are your stormwater drains, outfalls from businesses, industrial activities, all the way down to how you fertilize your yard and your lawn. The implementation is delegated to the Washington State Department of Ecology. EPA looks to, in the state of Washington, for ecology to manage and regulate the permit, the administrative actions, and the enforcement aspects of the programs. And under the Clean Water Act, it covers certain municipal, industrial, and construction activities that occur. And we'll be discussing those and the related permits as we continue through. The regulation enforcement, it is enforced by the Department of Ecology and the Clean Water Act, and the MPDS state regulations allows for penalties up to $32,500 per day per violation. Those violations can include not taking your samples, not doing your paperwork correctly, not reporting. So it can become very costly to be out of compliance with these permits. The Clean Water Act does allow provisions for third-party lawsuits for other organizations to come in and say permittees are not compliant with their permits, and then put a lawsuit out to them. And third parties are actively exercising this right in the state of Washington. Back in 2007, a third party exercised this option against the Port of Bellingham. The genesis of our quarterly, and it was primarily because of paperwork issues and administrative issues that cost upwards to $100,000 to deal with through legal fees and settlement costs. And that really is the genesis of our quarterly stormwater report, and really auguring into our programs and moving forward with them. So what we have is four active MPDS permits that we deal with at the Port of Bellingham, and it's predominantly in the industrial stormwater general permit that Elise will talk about a little bit later. The Western Washington Phase 2 municipal stormwater permit, you may hear that referred to as the Phase 2. The municipal permit, or the muni permit, that goes port-wide. I'll give a little bit more detail on that in a few minutes. And then we won't cover so much the individual discharge permits that applies at the ASB and the airport landfill. And then there's also construction stormwater permits that we have as needed. And for the larger projects, those are generally managed by the contractors. And with that, Elise.
So the industrial stormwater general permit is issued by the Department of Ecology approximately every 5 years. The current permit is effective from January 2015 to December of 2019. The industrial stormwater general permit regulates stormwater discharges from covered industrial activities on the sites with permits. So the Port of Bellingham has an industrial stormwater permit for the Bellingham International Airport. As you can see there on the left, that shows the coverage area. The industrial activities covered at that site are de-icing activities, as well as equipment maintenance and any other industrial activities that the tenants are performing there, and port activities as well. The site on the right, the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, is a permit that we've applied for. We have not received it yet. We expect to receive it any day. So I thought I'd just include it in this presentation because we really literally thought it might have already been delivered and coverage offered to us at this point. But you can see the coverage area there for the Bellingham Shipping Terminal. That will cover port activities as well as tenant activities within that site, within the red boundary. And the predominant industrial activities there will be water transportation, so marine cargo transportation. And we tried to make the permit broad so that other industrial activities could occur there as well.
So can I jump in real quick? I think recently a boat was moored here at the terminal, and there was some activity on the vessel itself, but not on the land inside this red-lined area. The permit that the port seeks is only for these areas. Is there a separate permit or some other coverage that would be required that the port should maintain or be aware of in regards to vessels that are moored here and being worked on?
I think it's a matter of the amount of work being done, and in this case, Ecology looked at it, and it was, they discussed it being under 25% of the top surface of the boat. As long as you keep it under that, you don't need to do the work in a permitted ship or boat yard.
That's, and it's, is that, so I gotta ask this question. If I've got a boat that's 800 feet long and I'm doing 25% of the superstructure, I'm stripping the paint or whatever, or I have a boat that's 50 feet long, that's a lot of different square footage we're talking about, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And this is
Thanks,
kind of, there's a kind of a gray area with the Department of Ecology on this right now.
Okay.
And some of the basic determination was, as Elise said, is that it's based on the percentage of work being done above the top of the deck. There's some other exceptions to that for that they would prefer that to be done in the shipyard or under a shipyard permit. This particular example, and we're working really closely with our shipping terminal operations folks to make sure that as contracts come in, if there's proposed work to be done that falls under that category, that we're early on looking at that. Does this fit into what we would have as a coverage component of the industrial stormwater permit, or would it be required to be done under a shipyard permit or something like that, and then refer that, make a decision at that point. So in this case, we worked with Ecology and they said this was okay. I think it's going to be partially on a case-by-case basis, but it is currently based on this percentage assumption. And they have looked at other areas like down in Seattle where there's a lot more of this type of activity. So our local ecology inspector went down and worked with some of the folks down in that office to say, okay, what are we doing down there? So they're making sure it's consistently applied across the state. So it is that's how we're approaching these ones.
All right, so I see Chris is in the audience. This is something that I think we should probably be, it seems like a bit of a newer thing for us here at the port. With the terminal in its former use, there wasn't a lot of activity. But if we've got, say, 30 ship calls a year, even if they're there for 3 days, it's 90 days out of 360. So if Chris is doing his job, we might have other activities like this. The one that was called into question, there was some work being done above the water line, I guess. And I would definitely support that we do more work like that here, but we're going to have to certainly be more aware of those activities and what our responsibilities are, and not just oversight, but also maybe there's some permits or something that we might need to manage for people as well. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Brian.
Yes.
Yes, Bobby. Go ahead, Commissioner.
So if I'm understanding right, once the vessel puts its lines to the shipping terminal docks, it falls under, we assume the liabilities of what's going on. We're liable for whatever they're doing for regulating it and so on and so forth. Does that fall to us, or is another entity going to regulate that?
If their activities are involved with the industrial activities stated for the permit, then we would be able to have our best management practices. Generally, they'd be having activities on the dock. If their activities go further and extend into the water, such as if there's something landing from the boat into the water, then that may bring in a different set of regulations, and in that case, the Department of Ecology would step in. So there's a water pollution law that applies in that regard. And it would also be on the boat owner, the company, instead of the port for that particular instance.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is, if there's an infraction upon the vessel, they're doing too much per square foot, who's liable for that? The port or the vessel?
Generally, the vessel.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
What are the rules on scrubbing down, say, a pleasure craft, a 40-foot pleasure craft, washing your boat in our harbor?
From what my understanding is that no soap be allowed, that they're allowed to scrub it down with water. But Alan, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You can scrub it down, no soap, and you cannot scrape off the bottom if you have anti-fouling paint. But you can have a diver down there, and if you have a if you're not using anti-fouling paint, then you can do minimal wipe down. You can't do, serious scrubbing where you're going to flake a lot of stuff off.
So you've seen the soap used, right? Because
I have.
I've sat and watched it used. Yeah.
And what are the rules in stormwater on washing cars today in Whatcom County or in Bellingham? Are you allowed to do it?
Well, I live in a very restrictive area up near the lake, and the signage up there indicates that if you are going to wash your car up there, they'd prefer that you take it to a car wash, which is plumb to sewer. So, but I've also heard that if you're not in that Lake Whatcom watershed area, you could wash your car on a grassy area. So there's infiltration.
If you have a concrete driveway, you can't wash your car in a concrete driveway?
No, not recommended.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just drive up in the yard.
So what you're saying to me is if with all the environmentally friendly soaps we have that are biodegradable and everything, you can't use any of that soap to wash anything in any of our harbors? Which interests me because in California you can use any kind of soap as long as it's biodegradable, environmentally friendly.
I think that the biodegradable label can be interpreted in many ways, and it's used a lot by manufacturers to, it's kind of a green, what do they call that? Greenwashing or whatever, where it's.
Well, I'm going to wash my car with oil because it's 100% natural and biodegradable.
All right. So moving back to the industrial stormwater general permit. The industrial stormwater general permit has requirements that apply at all sites. First and foremost, there's a requirement for a stormwater pollution prevention plan, the SWIP, and that essentially is a roadmap for stormwater protection at the site. The permit requires that we have a SWIP team, and that team is responsible for implementing the SWIP and also updating it when it's needed. It's a living document, and so it's there's hand scribbles all over it, and that's what they like to see. There's annual training required for employees. There are monthly inspections in writing that document facility equipment, any stormwater contamination noted, and whether the best management practices are performing according to the way they're supposed to. There's quarterly monitoring and reporting that's required. That's sampling and reporting as what's called a DMR, Discharge Monitoring Report. There's also an annual report due May 15th to Ecology. And there are best management practices and engineering controls that are implemented on these sites to ensure stormwater protection. There are also responses required when you exceed the benchmarks for your sampling. There are generally 5 things that we sample for or monitor for. And if there are exceedances, then there are responses required, level 1, level 2, and level 3 corrective actions per Department of Ecology. The permit status currently at the airport, we have an updated stormwater pollution prevention plan, and our mapping is up to date as well. Our quarterly sampling has been suspended. We're in a period called consistent attainment, and that we achieved because of 8 quarters of consistently meeting our benchmarks. We will be resuming sampling at the airport on October of 2017, coming right up. Our inspections, our reporting, and our preventative maintenance and training are all in compliance. And I have been bringing stormwater topics to the airport stakeholders meeting approximately quarterly to keep stormwater in the front of their minds.
So is the sampling suspended just for the airport or also for the airport or the landfill out there?
The landfill is a separate permit and sampling is ongoing.
Doesn't count in what we're seeing here on BLI.
That's right.
Okay.
This is the industrial stormwater permit at BLI, yeah. Whoops, pardon me. So in regards to the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, as I said, there's going to be a new permit. We expect at any time. The stormwater pollution prevention plan for that site is complete. The training has been scheduled, and we expect to begin sampling in the third quarter of 2017. The stormwater treatment installations are currently being put in place, and so you can expect operations to begin there very soon. I'll turn it back over to Alan.
Quick question on BST. So do we have an approved system for the dock or the wharf and the pier?
There is a pilot assembly that's being installed right now.
Okay.
Yes, and it's for the active area, so it's not the whole pier, just the central section of the pier.
Fantastic. Thank you.
All right, the Phase 2 permit. This is where it gets really fun. So this permit covers everything from the north side of the airport down to the south side of Fairhaven, with the exception of a little Swiss cheese portion of the airport where we're covered by the industrial stormwater permit. And this goes on all the port property. And what this permit does is it authorizes the port to discharge stormwater to the waters of the state. It's a port-wide effort to ensure compliance, much like the industrial stormwater permit and with the Phase 2 permit. Out of our shop, we manage the administrative controls, ensure that the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and we're meeting all requirements. But we can't do that without the help and the support of the other divisions within the port. The airport for the industrial permit at the airport, the shipping terminal folks for the industrial permit there, and then the maintenance and real estate, and the other folks that really help us in engineering put together the Phase 2 permit requirements. So it really is a port-wide effort that was directed by the leadership of the commission many years ago. The commission back then also said that when we were first covered with the Phase 2 permit, it's going to be a port-wide program. It's not going to just be in those areas that we're required to cover. So we also managed the program up in Blaine, even though Blaine is not an area that is required to be covered under the permit. And the areas that are required to be covered are larger cities, counties, so part of the city of Bellingham, part of the city of Linden, all the city of Bellingham and all the city of Linden, parts of the county, and it's within the urban growth boundaries. And so since Blaine doesn't meet the requirements for the permit, they're not required to be covered under this point. But we do manage the same program for our Blaine Harbor facilities and our Sumas facilities.
So Alan, I wasn't aware of that particular thing. So I always assumed that every port property was managed the same way. We're not doing anything different in Blaine that we wouldn't be doing down here in Bellingham.
No, that's what I'm saying, is that we manage the stormwater program the same up there, even though it is not under the coverage of the Phase 2 permit because it's not a required boundary.
That's a little surprising given the water quality issues in Drayton Harbor, that some folks wouldn't have come to the port, or every landowner for that matter around the harbor, and said, hey, what's going on? But didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it's part of the regulation within the Phase 2 permit that says the areas such as Blaine and the smaller communities aren't required to be covered under the Phase 2 permit. Therefore, we're secondary permittee under the program, which our land holdings and properties that are within a primary permittee need to be permitted. So we're not literally permitted for our Blaine properties or our Sumas properties. Again, but the commission says, Port, we will manage our stormwater programs across the board, regardless where our permitted areas are. So we have the same program up there, the same labeling, the same cleaning, the same standards that we do on any port property.
So the commission probably gets credit for that, but I think we should probably blame our legal team, because I'm going to bet it started there. No.
It actually did start with the environmental team. who said, let's go ahead and do it on a uniform basis. The Phase 2 permits
hang
cover
on.
about 80 cities in Washington.
One
That's about
sec,
it.
Frank. Did we lose?
I'm here. I don't know what happened.
So it did start with the environmental department, and actually the Phase 2 permits cover, I think, about 80 cities in Washington, about the biggest 80 cities or towns in Washington. And so, and it may be in 4 or 5 counties, but it's not widespread throughout the state.
Well, shout out to our environmental folks then.
And it has to do with the population that it services, that the community services, and we fall within that category. Some ports don't. But again, we're a Phase 2 permittee. We don't have quite the requirements as a primary permittee, and I believe the understanding or the reason for that is that secondaries are again within a primary permittee's holding. So the city of Bellingham has far more regulations and monitoring requirements under the Phase 2 permit than we do as a secondary permittee. It's reissued, the permit is reissued approximately every 5 years. And the current permit that we're on is effective from August 2013 through July 2019. You will notice that that is 6 years. We found out just last week that Ecology is going to extend the existing permit 1 year. We'll reissue a new permit in 2019, and they opted to extend that to make sure that they capture everybody's comments and do a very thorough update, and then also align it with the Eastern Washington permit. The Phase 2 permit is actually, there's 2 permits. There's one for Eastern Washington and one for Western Washington. And generally, when they renew the permit, it comes with increased regulations. The last time it was renewed, Linden was required, and parts of Ferndale, I believe, were required to have coverage under the permit. So I'm assuming, and sometime in the future, the smaller communities will also get rolled into this. The permit requires a stormwater management plan, otherwise referred to as a SWIMP. And I'll make sure I'm on the right slide. So, and that stormwater management plan has 6 required components that we got to address, and I'll run through each one of those. And the stormwater management plan is required to be updated annually and posted on the port's website. So you will find on the environmental section of the port's website that we have our current SWIMP that was updated last month. And it also requires an annual report to be submitted to Ecology, and that is also on the port's website. So I'm going to quickly run through the required elements of our stormwater management plan. We need to address public education and outreach. This includes the stormwater labeling that we have, that you'll see in all the parking lots. Outreach to our customers, tenants, citizens, talking about the impacts of stormwater, washing practices, pet waste. We manage these through our environmental compliance assessment program. We help get the word out. We have notices on the website, and we include articles in our various newsletters that discuss some form or aspect of stormwater. We also cover in the SWIMP public involvement and participation, and that's met by putting our stormwater management plan on the website and inviting the public to provide comment. There is an email address that they can click on, provide comment, and that comes straight to me. And I have received a few comments over the years from there. And it also requires us to manage illicit discharge through the detection and elimination. And illicit discharge is basically anything that isn't rainwater or snowmelt that goes down into the catch basin. So any processed water, sand, dirt, grass clippings, pet waste, litter, cigarette butts, paints, chemicals, and mop buckets, and your coffee are all considered an illicit discharge.
Did you say my coffee?
Yes, I did.
The coffee I throw out on the street when it's cold because I don't want to drink it?
That's right. You can't do that.
Then I won't. All right. I have one of those little badges there on my van, and it popped off the ground. I stuck it on the back of my van probably 6 years ago, with no new adhesive and gravel on it, and it's still there. So I don't know what kind of glue was in those, but it's good glue.
Gorilla Glue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the illicit discharge, the permit required the commission to approve by resolution an illicit discharge resolution. That was done on May 20th, 2008. And I'm not going to read through the whole thing. But what that did require is that that included in that in that resolution is policies and an enforcement plan. So a method to say, how can we go onto tenant properties and enforce fixing any illicit discharges, mapping of all of our stormwater utilities. Again, that's where facilities and the engineering crew helps out a lot. We have to inspect 1/3 of all the outfalls annually, make sure that they're still operating correctly, that we haven't seen any degradation on our outfalls. Look at any kind of source tracing and elimination. We found when we were doing the C Street project, a couple of illicit connections to the stormwater connection, and working with the city, we resolved those. We reported it appropriately to ecology and included it in our annual report as required. We need to have a spill response plan. We have that, and it also requires that we have training to staff who can affect stormwater quality. And the last three required elements of our SWIMP is construction site stormwater runoff control, and that gets back into having a construction stormwater general permit for all the projects that require it, and even those projects that don't require it, that we're using the appropriate best management practices. And we also coordinate on those with our local jurisdictions. Post-construction stormwater management, we coordinate with our local jurisdictions for inspections of our stormwater management and the practices, be it with port-owned facilities or with tenant-owned facilities. The city, under their primary phase 2 permit, they're required to annually inspect certain stormwater, new stormwater improvements. And then pollution prevention, this is just some good housekeeping. And this is, we have to have an operation and maintenance plan for the port. We've done that. We've developed that many years ago and keep updating that as we go along. And it includes the best operating and best management practices for roads, highways, and parking lots, fleet vehicles. That gets into no washing over a catch basin. External building maintenance includes pressure washing the building, parks and open spaces, material storage and equipment maintenance, and to train all employees whose job impacts stormwater quality. So those are the primary elements of the phase 2.
So was that one of the Port's Humvees there with the little pad underneath it?
What's that?
Was that one of the Port's Humvees with the little pad underneath it to catch the drips?
Yeah, you got to put pads underneath everything. And with that, Elise?
So that concludes the technical permit-driven aspects of the stormwater program. So now, as we get close to the end of the presentation, just some examples of previous and upcoming projects that are stormwater related. We had, on the previous side, we had boat launch rinse stations installed, and that allows the customer to wash their boat off and have that water directed to sanitary sewer instead of going to the bay. And there's 3 of those that were installed, Blaine, Fairhaven, and here at Squalicum Harbor. At the airport, we had a fuel truck parking pad installed, and that includes a cement parking pad for those large fuel trucks that are operated by the fixed-based operators, and also an oil water separator. So in the event that they had a leak or spill with that large capacity truck, that it would be able to be collected. The de-icing system, containment system upgrades at the Bellingham Airport, that includes electronic valve controls, which can be operated from the ARF station and also from the terminal. And that includes metered discharge of the spent de-icer to the sanitary sewer. The Bellingham Shipping Terminal, as I mentioned, is just concluding the phase 1 stormwater improvements, and We are, we're in process on that, but just coming to a conclusion. There have been stormwater improvements to C Street. And the port also recently, in the month of May, hosted the company called ECOS. It's a company that provides stormwater and other trainings statewide. They're a nonprofit and they're well recognized. We had industrial stormwater trainings and a municipal stormwater training, and we did that this year and also last year, and had several port tenants participate in the training this year. And so on the upcoming project side, any stormwater utility infrastructure improvements, any major port project will generally have stormwater included as part of the development. For the waterfront redevelopment area at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal, again, we have the Phase 2 stormwater improvements that are being scoped right at the moment as we speak. And then in regards to the former GP site, city developments, other development projects, and possibly any port development projects would also include stormwater infrastructure upgrades and even placement, because they're brand new. So I think we're just about it here. Alan will conclude.
So with that pretty much concludes our presentation. Stormwater, it is what we do. It is what we take pride in. Elise and I, we both spent quite a few hours in training. And I think one of the things that we get the biggest pride on if we walk into a room and say, we're here to talk to you about stormwater, and the general response is, we know we're going to get to them. And part of the environmental goals, it's really to meet the permit compliance and support the other port divisions either through the administration of the permit, the compliance assistance, and research, helping other staff, get the required and operational trainings that they need on either spill response, best management practices, any of the permits, troubleshooting stormwater issues, and then being the regulatory interface with the city, county, and state. We also support our port tenants in their stormwater programs when they call and they ask, not as consultants, but sharing our experience. And then we also work with the local government coordination, and we believe we have a great relationship with the local regulators. So we do spend quite a bit of time. We appreciate the direction and the support that the commission has given us over the years, and we appreciate this opportunity. And with that, any questions?
I don't have a question. Thank you for the presentation. This image is really, I think, a good way to finish a conversation like this, because stormwater, just complying with the laws is one thing, right? But in this image, you see Mount Baker and the lake, and of course the harbor, or the bay, Bellingham Bay, and the snow on the mountain reminds me that if you go to the Arctic and you sample the tissue of a polar bear, you'll find mercury contamination, and they've never even been near an industrial site in their entire lives. So even these pretty little areas that we like to say, oh, this is great, like the bay, if there was nothing living in that water, it would still look just like that. It'd just be this blue reflective water, even though there was not a single living thing in it. But we know that there is, right? And we rely on all those things. So it's expensive, it's hard. I don't think we do enough. Dan raises his eyebrows because he grows food in Puget Sound, and I won't eat anything that grows in Puget Sound. So I'll never buy your oysters, but I appreciate that you do that.
It's okay, I'll buy you oysters.
You'll buy oysters. You can buy Hamma oysters. Is it Hattie Bennett the Hamma?
And we have a shortage, so that's not a problem.
Well, you can get the oysters at Rock and Rye, but it's important that we do this stuff, and it is hard, it is expensive, and I for one appreciate everything that you folks are doing, and I know that folks in the community think we can do more. There's not unlimited amounts of money to do more, but I think everything we can do, we should do. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Briscoe, did you have any questions?
Yes, I do. In regards to the redevelopment site, the GP redevelopment site over there, I know they've had stormwater issues, is why the road's held up. Is that the city? Is that the city? That entire site, is that the city's responsibility for the stormwater over there? that redevelopment side, or is that all in our hands?
Thanks, Commissioner. This is Brian. Yeah, it's kind of 50-50. There's, for the majority of the redevelopment area, the city utilities under the interlocal agreement with the port and city are handled under by the city. Whereas over in the industrial area where Grand Camp is at, in the Log Pond area, that's currently operated by the port. So the new infrastructure that's being built under the interlocal agreement with the city is the city's responsibility. If we have some ongoing industrial activities like on the shipping terminal or maybe in the marine trades area, that would probably fall under the port. So it's kind of case by case, but the majority of the new infrastructure in the downtown waterfront kind of mixed use area is going to be the city's responsibility.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. That's all I have.
Hey, I got to ask you, though, how old is this photo? Because I'm seeing some things in there that are
Oh, this is a long time ago.
not there anymore.
It still has sawdust there at GP.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'd say this is late 90s.
There's the harbor's not built out, the inner harbor, and there's still that mill down there, and it looks like a raft of logs down on the around behind the shipping terminal. That was a while ago. There's less haze now, though. That's good.
Well, there's no Bellwether Hotel.
No.
So that tells you it's pre-98 or so when that construction started, right? I don't think there's even the restaurant down on that end, so maybe early 90s?
I guess it's probably early 90s. Gate 12 is not in, and that was the last thing that was installed before I went up to Blaine, and that would have been 94.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
So you want to take a 4-minute recess, Commissioner?
I don't think we do, unless Bobby wants to. He's on the phone, so.
He's
No, I'm
probably
good.
Probably still in the bunk there in his boat.
Hey, now, don't be giving away my trade secrets here.
Okay, we'll continue then. Any public comment? No one signed up, so we'll go to our first action item. And Diane, now you wanted this pulled, Commissioner, and I didn't mean to be rude and not answer you, but.
So Dan's referring to an email I sent. I'd like to postpone definitely this action item until our next meeting. Do we have one in first week of July? Yeah.
Which is a good time to plug our meeting in July. We'll be on July 5th, not the 4th, because the 4th is a holiday, so we will meet on the Wednesday, the 5th.
Wednesday, the 5th. I knew we moved something. So this is a pretty clear-cut resolution. I don't have a problem with it. I think some people would. Now, obviously, we typically don't get engaged in, sort of legislative issues, but I think.
First, if we're going to talk about it, do we need to read the item?
You can read it if you like. Go ahead.
And it won't be an action, that will just a discussion.
I have a motion here on the floor. Would you like me to read it as a motion?
Go ahead and read it.
Please.
A motion to approve Resolution Number 1363, establishing a policy banning the placement of campaign signage on port property.
So the issue for me, I think, goes a little bit beyond just campaign signage, because in a conversation with Rob, and the leases that are typically signed, they essentially ban signs, period. But there are privately owned buildings on port land, and there are port buildings on port land. So I don't know that, me personally, I would say we should ban campaign signs. It kind of opens a question of, well, we're already banning signs, right? So why are we calling out banning, campaign signs? So I'm not quite sure we should go down the road of saying we're specifically saying just campaign signs, because there could be a lot of other signage that people might want to put up in their privately owned buildings that would essentially go against the leases that have already signed, which says there are no signs allowed, period. So I just want to have a little more discussion with the commission about what exactly we're hoping to get out of this, so we're not just banning one thing and opening the door for other things, but then creating a bit of a problem for us, overall in the bigger picture. So I'd like I said, I'd just like to postpone this, maybe a modest rewrite, I'm not quite sure, but I'd just like to postpone this, a vote on this until our next meeting if we want to move forward with this. And that way, both Dan and Bobby can have some input with Rob and see if we want to rewrite this a little bit.
I think it's a good discussion. Commissioner Briscoe, did you have any input at this point?
Well, yeah, I mean, it can all be a little confusing. Like Commissioner McCauley says, you have private property on port property. So how do you is who owns the fence or who owns the building? And it can all be a little confusing, especially to tenants. So I think we probably need a clear avenue. I mean, obviously there's a reason in the past that the commission did this. I think there's probably several good reasons not to allow, but there may be some good reasons to allow. So I think we'll maybe dig into it just a little bit deeper before we vote on it. I think I would agree with Commissioner McCauley if we put it off until the next meeting, and we can talk about it a little bit further with Rob independently and move forward from there.
And could I ask, Shirley, could you address this if I ask you this tonight, or should I wait? What does the language typically say about
The language, I can address that. The language says no unauthorized signs.
Okay.
And that's true whether it's typically if it's a land lease with someone-owned building on it, and surely if I get something wrong, please jump in, but if someone owns their own building, we still have a ground lease with them that prohibits the unauthorized display of signage. And the reason for that is if you take the Bellwether development area, we don't want the Bellwether Hotel, who owns their own building, to throw up a bunch of Las Vegas-style neon signs. We want some control over what that Bellwether development looks like. So we have that restrictive language in there, whether they own the building, whether we own the building, whether they're leasing buildings, land, or even fences from us.
So let's say the Gaston Bay building, I think the port still owns the property under the Gaston Bay.
That's correct.
Okay, so on the south end, next to the plywood plant, a lot of vertical windows. You could see, I could see, individual folks in quote their window putting up a sign to support whatever Save the Whales, whatever issue that they've got. They want people to be aware of. If I put up a sign that said, Save the Puffin, and I'm in the Gaston Bay building on the 3rd floor, would that be violating the lease?
I think it would be if it's visual from the exterior, because our lease language is very specific. It says, no sign shall be installed without the prior written permission of the port. And I would say generally 99.9% of our leases have that language.
Frank, do you think the law is clear on quote, sign, unquote?
I do. I'm looking on my laptop. I keep my laptop here in case you have questions. Standard port commercial lease, paragraph 7.8, which appears in every 7.8 that I can recall. No sign shall be installed without the prior written permission of lessor, the lessor here being the port. That's true for our leases for buildings, our leases for land. I'm not sure about the leases for web lockers.
It's true for both our web lockers, which are called upland storage agreements, and it's also true for our moorage agreements. So.
Sure.
So, so we would have to give our prior written permission if there is a sign that's visible. I would say from the property line is probably where it would come down.
And for me personally, and I like I said, we're not legislators, and I know this is a First Amendment issue, or maybe it's not, but I'm not sure that I see a difference between I put a sign in the back window of my canopy and I park on a piece of property that I'm renting from the port. I have a lease for this. Let's say it's a web locker, and I pull into my space in my web locker. That's my personal property, right? I have a sign in my truck, okay? But let's say I also own a building, right? And I put a small sign in the window of my building. Right, so does this rule extend to my vehicle? Because it's clearly extending to at least the building.
I think that this rule, obviously it would be subject to somebody's interpretation, some judge's interpretation. Let me start by saying this. First of all, we're dealing with a contract. We're dealing with a lease. So we're dealing with a voluntary arrangement between the port and a tenant. And as such, I don't think it's going to raise a constitutional issue. It's not in the public spaces of the port. It's in a contractual area where parties have negotiated the terms of an agreement. Secondly, if you're on our leasehold as a result of this lease, whether you drove your truck on there, you sailed your boat there, you have an office there, whatever, you're bound by the terms of this lease. So to answer your question, yes, the port can enforce its lease. It can enforce its lease on its leaseholds, whether that be a building or land. I don't see a constitutional issue being successful. That's not to say someone wouldn't raise it, Commissioner, because it's a contractual relationship of a voluntary nature. What you could not do, to give you some parameters of the curb lines for the commission decision, is obviously say, we deny rights to everybody except the Bull Moose Party. They can have all the signs they want, or the Libertarian Party, the Republicans or Democrats. As long as you're consistent, you can enforce your lease terms.
So, obviously politics brings out emotions in people, but I've been seeing around the county, Save Cherry Point jobs or some yard signs or something like that.
Same issue.
Same issue.
You- The commission, through its staff, gives its staff direction to create these leases. You execute these leases, and it's up to you whether or not you really, in a sense, want to enforce these leases. And it's the same issue whether someone has a going out of business sign, or half off today, or any type of signage. This is a negotiated term of the port leases. Just like we say, you'll keep the place free of trash, you'll provide us insurance, a variety of negotiated terms. That's what's different about this. When we start talking about issues in our public spaces, for example, in our parks or in the in the ferry terminal or in the airport, we have a whole bunch of sets of different rules that apply to public spaces owned by a government. But these are private arrangements between the port and its tenants. Hope that answers your question. I'm telling you, you have complete discretion.
Well, I just so, Bobby, are you still there?
Yes, yep.
So,
No, I'm
just so
I'm glad we're having this discussion because it's getting airing things out I had questions about.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I kind of feel like, well, there's some, well, I just want people to know what issues I care about, right? And I kind of feel like I should be allowed to let people know what I care about when I'm not standing there at the time. The other side of it is, it's sort of technically public land, and a clear-cut rule that says, these are the boundaries, and there are no exceptions. Might be a little bit easier to manage overall, I don't. So anyway, that's why I was hoping we could postpone this for at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah, there is a different rule for the port's public spaces, that is, spaces open to the public, versus the port's, for lack of a better expression, proprietary spaces, where we lease property to somebody for their exclusive use and possession.
So, for example, the public space, let's say Zewanich Point Park, or the pier up in Blaine, I could stand there all day long holding up all the signs I wanted, and I would have the support of the law behind me to do that.
You can, so long as you do not interfere with the functioning of the public space. So it's easiest to understand at the airport. At the airport, people are allowed to have spaces where they can express their views, so long as those spaces or how they express their views do not interfere with the functioning of the airport. So you can't stand in the TSA line with a sign, but you can, the airport has spaces that allows people to say, and we've all seen these tables at different airports around the country, where people with certain political views are allowed to be at these tables and advance their opinion. Same thing with the Blaine Pier, same thing with the Bellingham Cruise Terminal, and certainly the port's public parks. People have a right in public spaces to make public statements under the Constitution. But that does not extend to when somebody signs a lease and leases property from the port. It's a different deal.
What about in the harbor? Same deal? Even though it's floating property, it's water, but it's still the same deal?
You're asking if somebody wanted to drive their
no, let me.
A tenant?
No,
A tenant
yeah,
would lease a space to.
and I'll say this because 4 years ago, somebody made a sign on my behalf during a campaign and put it on their boat, which was really nice. I appreciated that, but I don't think that would be they were breaking the rules, I think, right?
Depends what the mortgage agreements say. I haven't reviewed the mortgage agreement. If staff probably knows if they prohibit
It's
signs.
very similar language to what you saw in the commercial lease agreements where it just says no unauthorized signs.
So there you go. Now, interesting question, could someone get a kayak and paddle through the marina with a sign on there? They probably could. Probably the open waters of public waters, and they could do that. Again, once they've entered into a commercial relationship with the port for a piece of property, then they're bound by the rules of that commercial relationship. And I might add, as is the port. We can't go onto somebody's personal, once they lease property from them, and say, we really don't like something about your business if it's not in the lease. So both parties are bound by the terms and conditions of the lease or the other agreement. And then, I hate to say that, but then that leaves us within your sound discretion as the commission to make the decision that's appropriate.
I come down a little bit different on it, although I would abide by any rule that we put in place because I'm a law-abiding citizen. But I think the policy that the port has to okay any signs on any port facility is absolutely spot on. I had 7 different stores and 7 different communities and shopping centers, and every single permanent sign we put up had to be approved by the landlord, and it makes all kinds of sense. The question comes in on tenant's property, and that is leased that a tenant leases from the port for a long period of time. Whatever we come up with after this discussion, I really want it to be fair. I want it to be consistent. And I don't want the staff to have to be policemen out there. I think they have more important things to do. In that same vein, no one is affected more by the policies that we make as commissioners than our tenants. And during I look at a political campaign and sign a lot different than I do a permanent sign on a building. And I think there is a protection of freedom of speech. I think a tenant should be allowed to put a campaign sign in their building or on their building or on their fence if they own the fence or if they're leasing the fence and it's included their property. So I think our tenants should be allowed to have political signs up for a short period of time, whatever that time period may be. 4 years ago, when Commissioner McCauley ran and I ran and our opponents ran, everybody had signs up. And so 2 years ago, signs were up as well on not on port property, but on tenants' property. And so when the political season started this year, everyone running got a letter from the executive director saying you can have political signs on tenants' property, but not on port property. So I guess, what's the difference today compared to 4 years ago when Commissioner McCauley ran, or 2 years ago when Commissioner Briscoe ran, or when I ran 4 years ago? What's the difference today?
Bobby, you have any input on that?
Well, I think the differences today is I think there's been some issues raised by the public about the signs being there. This is why we're having this discussion. I think that needs to be mentioned, that this isn't something that was brought by staff or brought by the commission. It was brought by the public, that the signs shouldn't be on port property. And obviously those folks must be in tune with the resolution that states that. That we've been driven by that. I mean, if you want to be fair and equitable to everyone, then there is no signs nowhere. That's the only way it can be fair and equitable to everyone, is there is no signs period anywhere. The thing that I may have an issue with, and wondering when we're speaking to the political arena things going on, is if you've got a number of folks who want one person and they don't want the other person, and that person doesn't get the the prime area when the roads and the port property where people are driving by every day going to work. So there's an issue of fairness, and I think that they were trying to address that in the resolution before. So I mean, probably in my mind, listening to the discussion we've had here, I'm glad we had that. The only reason I was asking to put this out is because we haven't had any discussion about it, but we're having discussion about it now. But I would think in my mind, if we really want to do the right thing, then we stand with the resolution we have. There's no signs for anybody anywhere from whatever point forward. If you want to make it fair and equitable for everybody, that's how you do it. And nobody has a sign out there. Whether it violates a constitutional right or not, I think Frank has answered those questions. I think this must have been discussed many times before, and they came up with a resolution because it was an issue, and it's now becoming an issue again. Why now rather than 4 years ago? Is because I think of public reach out to the port saying that this shouldn't be going on. So we definitely have to answer those questions that have been asked. Is why are we doing this when it says we can't?
How many complaints have we received here at the port?
I don't know if I can give you an exact count because I'm not sure who all has received them. I know Mike Hogan's gotten a call or two, and I've gotten a couple calls as well. Yeah.
So my perspective on this isn't, and this is why I raised the issue of just signs like, my facetious "Save the Puffin" sign. But I brought this up in the past about all the sandwich boards that were, sort of plunked down the road down on Rotor, which, really I think, and probably this language probably, I'm just going to guess, got put into these leases years ago because they can be unsightly. And, the port can exercise, the commission can exercise its right to make sure that you don't have an unsightly facility on publicly owned property. So I asked Rob to put this together, I think really to have this conversation, but maybe we already have rules. Maybe we already haven't the right rules in place to say, there are no signs, and Bobby, I appreciate your fairness issue, and I wouldn't dispute that because I feel the same way. The only thing I would add to that is that, you could end up having a port staff person be the fairness police for every little thing, right? So I certainly don't want to have this resolution be something that's just building on top of and another useless rule that's really unnecessary. When maybe the rule that's needed is already in place and it just needs some reminders for people. And I think that maybe anybody who's been hearing about this year, it's come up in the past. I've been here for 8 years. It's definitely been coming up the entire time I've been here. As far as campaign signs, I've never purposely put a campaign sign anywhere in the waterfront. I kind of figure if you don't know me on the waterfront by now, then having a sign is not going to help for sure. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming at on this. Is I'm not quite sure we even need this, even though I asked Rob to put this together just so we could have a conversation about it. But if we have the rules and the leases already, and maybe we're good there. We just need some friendly reminders to people every now and then.
Well, the problem is there was a friendly reminder. Executive Director Fix called everyone that had signs up and said, take them down. I'm the only one that took them down. So I put them back up 3 days later when no one else took them down. And I like I said, I can live with any rule we make. I do feel a real allegiance, though, to our tenants who suffer or profit from the decisions that we make, that they should have their freedom of speech to be able to put a temporary campaign sign up.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to suffer over this? I'm not losing money because I didn't put up a campaign sign for Dan Robbins.
No, and that's not my point. My point is they should have that right that anyone else does as an individual.
I'm going to...
Well, I might have an argument for that because if you go out in the county, as I did, to put signs up, you have to go ask the people whose property you're going to put the sign on whether you can or cannot put that sign up, and that's up to them. And in this case, that would be the port.
Yeah, that's...
How's that different than asking a property or a tenant?
Well, the port has said no, and they own the property. That's the difference. I'm just pointing out that if you go out and ask people to put signs up, and they say yes or they say no, at least I did. I didn't put the sign up if they said no. I just drove away. But in this case, The port has already had a resolution that's been in place for many years and not been enforced very heavily that says no.
I agree with it on all port property. My only question is with tenants.
Well, it sounds like we should postpone this and have a conversation.
Sure.
If we're okay with that.
I'm fine with that. Are you fine with postponing it, Bobby?
You bet. No problem.
All right.
Very good. So let's move on to action item number 2. If you could, please, Diane.
A motion by the Port Commission to approve an airport industrial park lease between the Port of Bellingham and the Puget Hound LLC for property located at 3710 Williamson Way, Bellingham, Washington.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Terry Leahy, Real Estate Representative. The document for your consideration today is a 2-year lease agreement with Puget Hound LLC for the former Humane Society building at the Airport Industrial Park. Before I get into the details of this, I'd like to mention and welcome Nick and Haley Apollo, who are the owners and operators of Puget Sound, and they're in the audience with us today. Puget Hound has been in operation since 2014, offering pet sitting and pet walking services, and they're looking to expand the business into pet boarding services as well. They currently have 5 employees and anticipate hiring a few more employees if they move into this facility. The lease has an initial term of 2 years with 1 3-year renewal option and 3 5-year renewal options. The lease also provides an option to purchase the building within the first 2 years at a predetermined price of approximately $53,000. The building has been vacant since 2013 and is in disrepair. A recent appraisal valued the building at $115,000 if it was in a functional condition. It will cost approximately $62,000 to bring the building up to a functional condition or a usable condition, and the purchase price of the building is basically the appraised value less the cost to bring the building up to a usable condition. The port would also save approximately $143,000, which it has forecasted in the 2020 budget to demolish the building. Should the Commission approve this lease, we would then, or staff would then, look at amending our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements and declare this building surplus. We would receive approximately $31,000 in rent in the first 2 years, and that includes a 2-month no-rent period for the Puget Hound to be able to do the upgrades to the building. And if the purchase option is exercised, we'd then get an additional $53,000 for the sale of the building. We certainly recommend approval of the lease, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Commissioner McCauley, any questions?
Yeah, I was a little surprised because I thought we were just going to tear this building down because I know it's in sad repair. So these folks really want this building.
That is our understanding,
All
yes.
right,
They've done a lot of research on it.
Okay, so just because I think it's important, and I've mentioned this about restaurateurs who are interested in the cruise terminal space, right? So is this a really good spot for them? Have they thought about this location? Is this really the right place? I mean, the Humane Society had the building, and a lot of times people say, oh, it was there once, maybe it should be there again, but it is a bit distant from the population center. This has all been thought out.
Our understanding is they certainly have thought this through. They provided us a good briefing of their business plan.
Okay.
If I may, I can certainly invite them up to answer those questions for you.
I'd love to hear some input. Seems like I'm putting you on the spot, but and I'll give you a little background from the reason for my question. There's a little, we call it the kiosk over at Bellwether. It's just sort of a 3-sided glass structure, and it's a super cool little spot, and everything that goes in there fails. So I just want to make sure that you folks know, and it's a great spot, but I just want to make sure you folks, this is going to work for you, so you don't end up getting into something and you just have to, walk away in the future.
Absolutely. This has been a 3-year process of searching through the county and the city and trying to work out the permitting for that. Kenneling is only permitted in the county, and then dog daycare facility is only permitted in the city. You can't have one in the other and one in the other. And so we've actually gone to the extent of changing the municipal code. I'm also in real estate, and I also do a lot of marketing as well too. And so we feel extremely comfortable with the location.
Okay.
because it provides the best of both worlds, and it's still relatively close to the city of Bellingham. So I think it would be a very, and we also have existing staff or existing clientele that are extremely excited about the transition as well too. So
And considering it's so close to the airport with our boarding services that we're hoping to offer, that's a one-stop shop. You know, people don't have to travel more than 10 minutes between dropping off their dog and getting right to the terminal. So it'll be really conducive for that service in particular.
Awesome.
we won't put up any political signs either.
Yeah. We'll avoid that.
No, you might encourage people not to put their dogs on airplanes, and I understand that isn't always a good thing to do. But
Right.
yeah, so fantastic. All right. So, and sorry if I seemed alarmist or something there, but you know,
No worries.
the port of Bellingham, and I think a lot of ports, we end up owning cul-de-sacs and places that people don't always go to a lot. You know, and I think that it's important to remind folks that, okay, this is full disclosure, you know, so. I'm glad
Absolutely.
you
We know
thought
what we're
about
getting into, and we're comfortable with it for
it.
sure.
Yeah, super great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So for clarification, between your rent and your tenant improvements, you'll have close to $90,000 into this building at the end of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
If you just walked away from it at that point in time, you'd lose the $90,000.
Yeah, we don't plan on walking away, but we're acquiring an SBA loan for the tenant improvements, and then we're going to be bootstrapping the marketing. We have significant. We can provide the business plan as well and all the financials and everything too, but we're well prepared to do that for sure.
Very good. Sounds great to me.
Bobby, anything?
Bobby, any Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I think Commissioner McCauley covered it pretty good, and it sounds like these folks have their game plan together, and I wish them well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
good luck. Seriously, that's going to be awesome.
Thank you very much.
Super
Your dogs
cool.
are all welcome to come hang out. So.
I might think about that. We just got a new little puppy, so
Yeah,
super
we
cool.
love this.
I know.
Cool.
Thank you. So, hearing, and nothing further, Commissioner Briscoe?
No.
Commissioner, hearing nothing, and no more there, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Let the record show that passes 3-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Terry, don't go far. Diane, if you could read our next action item, please.
A motion to approve a modification of harbor land lease and project development agreement between the Port of Bellingham and All American Marine to modify the term of lease, no rent period, insurance and inspection of the launch route clause.
Diane. Yes, the modification of lease number covers a number of different items. The first item I'd like to address is their current office trailers that they had at Fairhaven site. Originally, we had required them to remove those. They have since sold them to Fairhaven shipyards, so this modification allows them to leave it on the property. The second item that this does address is it moves out the start date of their lease by 2 months, and that is due to the delays in the construction of the building. So basically, instead of starting the lease on February 1, when they did not have access to the building, the lease now begins on April 1. The other items are more housekeeping. They are to do with the insurance and the indemnification clauses. We're updating those to include tenants who may be adjacent to the launch route. So those tenants would be covered as well. And then also it clarifies the launch route pre-inspection and post-inspection condition of before and after the launch. We certainly recommend approval of this modification. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner McCauley?
I don't have any specific questions about these, sort of a general question. There's a bit of property just to the, so it's sort of the south of their new structure. I think it's just dirt right now. Is that part of their leasehold? It's between the trail and the building.
It is not part of their leasehold, no, but it is, they do have an option on that.
To
To
lease?
expand, correct.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to look at the exact terms to see how far it goes and what the terms are on that.
All right, because I was extremely disappointed. We displaced a lot of small bunnies that used to hang out down there. Actually, some friends of mine from out of town used to call that Bunny Beach because there were so many bunnies, but somewhat of a joke. But yeah, I was kind of wondering, guys, there's a weird little bit of a space in there. I think that it was just some bare ground right now, but Wasn't quite sure what we're planning for that. Are we going to hold that in reserve for them then? Is that the intent?
We currently don't have a use for it, so it'll be held until the use comes up,
Okay.
and then we'll address it at that point.
But it would be intended for All American Marine first.
I'd again have to look at the document of how that was written. I don't exactly recall if they have a right of first refusal. I don't believe they do. I believe it's written up that if somebody were to approach us, we would give them the option to lease it. Right, right.
All right. That's it for me.
And the Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, I do have, on that piece of property, what are our parking conditions around there if we were to lease that other corner across from those folks out? I mean, what are the parking, we have enough parking there for what's going on?
The other leases, I believe you're mentioning, should have parking on their site. All American does have enough parking on their site as well. Currently, I believe they're using portions of Hilton Avenue, but that is just temporary until they can get fully moved in and get the site organized.
Okay. That would be my only question before we give up that property, to make sure we've got enough parking for everything they've got going on in the other businesses there.
One more quick question. Maybe you know the answer to this. Do you know how tall the building is on the high side? Is it 50-something?
It's 60.
60 feet?
65? 65 feet.
65 feet
65 feet.
on the peak.
I'm seeing some dry stack storage down in there. Okay, all right. Nobody even see it. It's behind this new tall building. All right, thanks, Dan.
The only question I had, we're going to lose 2 months' rent, but it's tacked on to their first rent period, their first lease.
The 2 months rent will just basically get deferred out, right? The whole term has just been moved out 2 months.
Okay. And didn't we have something in the lease if it didn't get opened on time? Wasn't there some restrictions or something that they had to pay for it? No?
Not that I recall, so no.
Super. And they sold their trailers to Fairhaven Shipyard.
Correct.
Super. Okay. Okay, thank you. That answers all my questions. Mr.
One quick comment on Commissioner Briscoe. There were a couple complaints about All American Marine parking in the parking lot, and we've addressed that with them. We've asked them to park on their property because there is a city park parking right there next to Bornstein. So I don't know if that's where the genesis of your questions, Commissioner, but we have addressed that with All American Marine, and they've moved their parking onto their leasehold premise and away from the park.
Yeah, well, I've been by there a couple times. I noticed there's a lot of vehicles parked other places and up and down the street there, and I wasn't sure if they didn't have room or they're not organized yet or what was going on there.
I think it's the not organized yet. Still a lot of construction activity coming and going, so they don't have full use of their parking lots yet. But they're supposed to have enough spots on their leasehold premise to accommodate all their vehicles.
All right, thank you.
Follow up on that, if I may. The parking lot, is that in the city's right of way? I know where it is, but it's.
I believe a portion of it's on the right of way, the rest of it is on our
It
property.
looked like that. So did we sign an agreement as part of that trail plan for that parking? I don't recall.
I don't think we have a formal agreement on it at some point, though, because that trail is temporary right now.
Yeah.
So at some point, when that trail becomes permanent, we'll probably have to develop permanent parking.
Okay, all right. So a complaint's one thing, but a legit complaint with, like this is city parking versus it's just parking.
But we want people to be able to come down here and park and use
yeah,
the
of course.
trails without, fighting with All American Marine over the spots, especially when they have enough spots on their leasehold premise. It was just, I think, an education thing.
Okay, all right. Cool.
Okay, anything else, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I have nothing.
Okay, hearing nothing else, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0.
Thank you.
New business. Do we have anything under new business?
I have nothing.
I
Commissioner
did.
McCauley?
I did. I wrote it down. I put it somewhere.
Well, while you're digging for it, Commissioner Briscoe, did you get a email today from Rudd Brown? He's now in the audience, and I think he wants to speak, and I want to allow him to only if you receive the information.
Yeah, just let me see if I can bring it up here. I didn't know we were doing that one, so but give me just a moment. But I think so, yes. To answer your question, I believe so, Dan. I just got to get it up in front of me.
Are you in agreement that?
Oh, you're the, yeah.
Sure, well, I want to be
You're
fair.
lucky in the middle, you get to do it.
Rod, I assume you're here to speak, if you'd like to take the podium?
Oh, crap.
Thank you, Honourable Commissioners. It's Rod Brown, Whatcom County Council. And if Commissioner Briscoe can't find it, it might be sent to him by Forrest Longman. Make it easy to
I have it, Mr. Brown. I have it in front of me. You're speaking of Exhibit A?
Correct.
Yes, I have it in front of me.
So the background of this is that we've had discussions about economic development, and part of that has been the formation of a business and Commerce Advisory Committee under the umbrella of the Whatcom County Council. The council moved forward in drafting up what we think would be a good workable committee, but we want this to be a joint exercise with the Port of Bellingham. So where we left this as a council is we approved this in form, but we haven't adopted this. And the request to the rest of the council was that I come and introduce this to you and then seek the Port of Bellingham's feedback, which I don't necessarily need any decision tonight, but I wanted to introduce it to you and then open it up for a dialogue. And the intention of this is to provide a group of people in the community that perhaps represent the best of the community in terms of the resources that we've got available to attract new investment and new companies to the area, to act as an advisory group and help us do a better job at marketing the community to encourage further employment growth.
Okay. Commissioner McCauley, any questions or?
So Rod, is this sort of an just like an opener to the conversation for where you want to go with this?
Yeah, we're please give us your feedback. Please tell us what you like, don't like.
Okay.
But this is the best that came out of our first round of the process. So.
Okay. The only question I would have now is I think when I came on board in 2010, I was the port's representative on an organization very, very similar to this. And I'm assuming the council has had conversations about former efforts.
Which one are you talking about? Which
was the Northwest Economic Development Council.
Yeah, I've also served on that as well.
Okay. So with that knowledge, how are you seeing this being different than that? Because I went to 2 meetings and quit going because I didn't see any real value. So I'm sure you've weighed those problems in this new effort and how to overcome them.
Yeah, I think I went to 3 meetings and quit going.
And Bruce, if you're watching, this is no reflection on you, so yeah.
So the fundamental difference, I think, between what we're proposing here and what the Northwest Economic Development Council was, that council was very top-heavy on electeds, some of which we were fortunate had business experience, the majority of which didn't. This is the exact opposite. This is very heavy on, in fact, if I remember correctly, we didn't actually propose that there was few, if any, electeds in this. It was basically people from the business community. And those that were in a position to want to be interested in bringing additional companies to the area, because it's not every business wants a competitor turning up on their doorstep. Certainly not every business wants to invest their time and money to attract a competitor. So these were industry segments that we felt would be inspired to help the right type of complementary business to locate. And then we put in the educational institutions because one of the draw cards, one of the things that we have to sell outside investment is the labour pool that we're generating out of the educational institutions. So it's a very different makeup than what you and I both have experienced.
So, and I think to follow up on that is that you've been a busy CEO, and you know the challenges that a lot of folks have to get away from their business and to put in an effort like this, and how long their attention span can be kept on an issue like this. So is their work feeding, because it's, your intent is to have them weigh into the council, the county council. How do you foresee keeping them engaged in a long-term capacity that's valuable to the council's actions?
So I've had fairly informal conversations with this, a couple of the commissioners and with Mr. Fix. I applaud the efforts of the port in terms of hiring, the process to hire the economic development director that you're looking at. I would see this board as providing an advisory role in terms of the direction of those marketing efforts, to make sure that the marketing efforts tie in with what the community, what the business community as a whole sees as the most valuable. So I think the way to, the secret to keep anybody engaged is make their time, make them feel like their time is well spent. I mean, you and I both walked out of those rooms and didn't come back because we didn't think our time was well spent.
Well, I know that if I was invited to an organization like this and I see that the purpose is to, sort of advise on regulations, and after a year of getting no movement on regulations, I probably wouldn't come back the second year. So the council is setting itself up for activities that maybe they haven't engaged in before, and having to belly up at the bar and actually make stuff happen.
Right. I don't know if I agree that we haven't done it before. I think there are certainly times where, for example, I felt like I've spoken about regulatory issues and felt like I'm speaking to an audience that is unfamiliar with the issues. I mean, one of the benefits of having Councilmember Sapal Sadhu on board is he's run several businesses himself, and Mr. Mann has also run businesses. So I think, again, it comes down to if we don't take their advice, if we don't listen to what they're doing, they're not going to show up next year.
And how do you see that, or do you yet see how the port fits in to this?
Well, I think again it comes down to I'd like the work that comes out of this in part to be providing guidance and advice to the direction of what your economic development director is doing, and I don't want this to come across as the county trying to drive the process here. I want this to be a joint effort.
With that in mind, there's no one from the port on this 13-person committee. There was 6 from higher education and 7 from the private sector. I guess
it's only 2 from higher education. I read this as 2 members from higher education representing Western, Whatcom, Northwest Indian College, and Bellingham Technical College. Not 2 from each, but 2 from all those institutions.
Yep.
And then you add that the 7 private sector individuals numbered there, 1 through 7, internet technology through commercial real estate. Then you add the 3 business representatives from various size businesses, 1 business representative from 1 to 15, okay. 1 from 15.
So
now,
it's
I
only,
only get to 12 there, so I'm not.
Yeah, and there's, you can have some flexibility. So,
I went through that the first time and I couldn't get to 13, so I did the 6 and 7 and came up with the 13. So that being said, we have a lot of 3 advisory committees here at the port.
Right.
Why would this, if we're the ADO and we're running the engine of economic development, would it not be the port's advisory committee rather than the county's?
And who runs it, who staffs it is entirely up for discussion. Again, this is the first volley in this discussion. Again, I want to stress the intent here is not for the county to be imposing a level of control over this process. It's more to perhaps look at it this way as a way of establishing a dialogue as to what the structure of the committee should be. I personally have strong feelings that we need to be very focused on those areas for which the community has a great strength and has something to market, which is why we chose those particular industry segments. And various segments have a different focus. So, for example, when I was running my business, if you'd said to me, would you help us bring more people here that need electronic technicians? My response is no, because the first thing they do is poach the ones I've already hired. If you ask someone from the software development community, would you help bring another software company here? They say absolutely, because they're looking for critical mass. Because one of the challenges they have is they can't get the talent they want unless they can promise that talent has a career path that doesn't just include them, that there's other companies they could work for over the course of their career, and they don't have to relocate somewhere else. So it's very much the type of industry that dictates the degree of support you get from the owners of those businesses.
So, excuse me, I see the port's role. I think the direction that we're aiming Rob at right now is it definitely fits into where I think you're going with this concept. One of the things that ports we're not legislative. We can't do that. So the port's economic development staff have to work within whatever realm of regulations and controls there are out in the real world. So no matter how much the port's economic development staff might say we have a niche that we can fill, but if there's something that's in the way, there's nothing the port staff can do about that, because that falls into the municipal government or the county's governance system that change the rules or adjust the rules. So I definitely see this as a positive move forward. So I don't have a problem continuing this conversation at all. So I think it's a good step.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good start. We can certainly sit down and work it out with our executive director and move forward. I feel fine with it. Thank you for the input.
Appreciate the time. Anything else?
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I appreciate what's being done here. I think we need to discuss it more. But one thing I'd like to ask is, we're adding another layer here, countywide with this. We're adding another layer, another group working on economic development. It seems to me we've got a lot of groups working on economic development. And we start pretty soon you've got a person on this one and a person on another one. They're getting spread pretty thin. What are we taking out of the picture? What layer are we taking out to put in a better layer? I'd like, if we're gonna do something better, I'd like to take away what hasn't been working. Are we gonna do that? Or are we gonna leave the other groups functioning so that we have arguments with this group and another group? And generally, that's the problem with advisory committees. You get a couple of them, and then pretty soon they're working against each other, and they're working on this group of people over here to do it this way, or this group of people over here to do it this way. I'd like to see us get one thing going that works, instead of a whole bunch of things that don't work for a couple of years, so we switch off to something new like this, and let's say this doesn't work, and we switch off to something new. I'd like to really see us put some time and thought into trying to get one thing that's going to work and help everyone do what needs to be done, rather than to keep adding things and trying things. So I would hope, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against this, but I would hope that we seriously go through this and take the time to make sure this is right and it's going to work right before we move forward with it. And I would like to see the port involved at all levels of it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I see this role as a little different to what we've done before, and filling a need that's a little different, because as I understand most government economic development, it's reactive. It's more focused on who knocks on the door and says, I'm interested in opening up an office, building a factory, creating employment in your area. And while that function certainly needs to be fulfilled, and it's certainly a valuable function, this is more directed at taking the expertise in different industry sectors and where we've got strengths, and having that provide advice as to how we go out and sell the community to the particular type of industries that we want to attract. This gives us more control over what our future looks like than we have by building an economy based on what others decide they want to do. This is about us deciding what we want our economy to be. And I'm particularly concerned about, for my own family or for everybody's families, I'm particularly concerned about us being appropriately aware of the influence of automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. They're going to have a significant impact on what the landscape looks like for employment going forward. And I'd like us to be proactive trying to attract the industries that are going to weather that change fairly well. So that's the first part of it. The second part is, I think anybody on this board is going to have a vested interest in being an ambassador. If someone comes, for example, and says, well, I'm interested in opening a recreation manufacturing business here, and we've got someone from the recreation manufacturing community on here, you've effectively got a captive ambassador for that area, for that particular industry segment. So, and I know those people are available. I mean, there are people in the community, but it just further binds them into the process of us all pulling in the one direction. So I don't think, and I certainly hope this is not duplicative with anything else we're doing.
How do you see this group being different from Team Whatcom? Obviously, the membership in Team Whatcom is different than this group, but what do you see that Team Whatcom isn't getting to you versus what this group would get to you?
Well, and there may be a lot of overlap in the membership for a start. But again, it's the fundamental difference in this one is focusing on leveraging what our strengths are and being proactive in that direction, more so than I think this community, or most communities for that matter, historically have done. So, I mean, this is an experiment. I hope it adds value. I hope it's not duplicative, but it is an experiment. So.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, I'm just thinking because I got Team Whatcom in my head right now. Team Whatcom is almost completely governmental and non-governmental.
It's NGOs and government, whereas this looks like it's very heavy private sector. So I think that's the difference between the two, is much more private sector representation here versus Team Whatcom.
And Team Whatcom's, I think, complete membership are people that are engaged in, quote, economic development activities.
That's right. Yeah, it's Chamber of Commerce, Sustainable Connections, us, TAG.
So, yeah, okay, yeah. So still value there, for sure. Not duplicative, I don't think, at all. Maybe, in conversation, there might be duplicative conversations, but still different staffing overall.
And I should also point out that the organisations like Team Whatcom, Sustainable Connections, the Chamber, Whatcom Business Alliance, to the degree that they can participate in being subject matter experts, the county has discussed that part of the economic development funding that we're looking at be allocated towards effectively buying some of their time, some of their staff time, to make sure they're available to assist an economic development director. So for example, if someone comes in and says, gee, I'm interested in doing a software development thing down on the waterfront, and you need someone from TAG to smooze them, introduce them around town, talk to other people in the software business. I'd like that person's time not to have to cut into something else they're doing or be funded by TAG. I'd rather it be partially funded by the economic development funds, because I think, frankly, that's what the funds should be used for.
So is there a conversation about shifting EDI spending then?
I think, well, part of it, we've had a conversation about both contributing in terms of the economic development role which you're looking at, but also in terms of, there's been a conversation about using some of that money for funding, partial funding of those respective organisations' staff's time to the degree that they contribute to this process.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think, and as far as EDI goes, I don't know that anything's really been spent on this sort of effort in the past.
No, not historically.
Yeah. Even though the law totally allows it, because I think if I read the law correctly, the ADO is assigned by the council, and then you can direct spending from the funds from the EDI to the ADO for efforts like the one you're talking about now. I just don't think it's ever really been done.
No, I mean, the RCW allows us to spend EDI money on public infrastructure or staff in economic development offices, and an economic development office is defined as a port, the county's designated ADO, or the county itself. So if we were to, you're been...
I'm smiling because two of those are right here.
Yeah, no, I know that. Why do you think I'm here? I know where the decision's made. Historically, most of that money has gone to public infrastructure. And our current discussion at the moment is that we should be devoting about $500,000 a year of EDI funds to direct targeted economic development, as opposed to more of a proactive, outward-focused economic development, as opposed to a more reactive, let's respond to who calls on the phone.
Red, is this, you and I have talked about establishing or using the EDI money differently, $500,000. Is this committee intended to be a governing board for that $500,000?
It's intended to be an advisory and guiding, well, my design, when I was thinking this through, was more of an advisory role. If it wants to be a governing role, that's something we can discuss. You're going to have an economic development director who may or may not be from the community, who may or may not have an intimate knowledge of the opportunities and the resources, and certainly to the degree that they don't have that intimate knowledge, they're going to need people to lean on that are very well connected in those sectors.
That's what my concern is too, though. I think we should wait till we get our economic development director in place. And that person should be the one that leads this advisory committee from the standpoint, looking back at our 3 advisory committees now, the director of aviation oversees the 2 airport advisory committees, and our marinas over the Marine Advisory Committee. So I think we need to give them enough latitude to embrace this as they go forward, or something similar to this. Once they're aboard, I would hate to put this in place and then bring that person in and say, now you've got to work with these folks. I'd rather see it the other way around.
The pro and the con to that is you could use this advisory group to help you do the screening and the ultimate evaluation of the person. And of course, you can tap into business executives in the community to do that anyway. So it doesn't have to be this by any means. The second thing is deciding what is the degree of what's the roles between that economic development director and the advisory board, and to the degree, if you look at how the influence or the power of decision making, whatever. If it's too dominant an economic development director, you won't get good people serving. If it's too weak an economic development director, the relationship's not going to work. So, it is a balancing act. I'm not, and by the way, there's no requirement that we fill these positions tomorrow. But I think, we all have to decide what we want the relationship to be between the economic development director and the advisory board. So.
Yeah, I might be looking at this a little bit different than you are, Dan. I don't see any conflict, and I think if I'm reading the language that you presented to us, Rod, this fits quite well with the county's comprehensive plan on economic development anyway. So this is a lot of this similar language. So this is just kind of giving you some teeth to the effort, as opposed to just the language of the effort.
It's the next level of detail from the comprehensive plan. So. Cool. As by the way, is also that we've got to have a more structured discussion about if we're going to spend $500,000 in economic development, what percentage goes to our contribution to the economic development director through the ADO, what percentage goes to the other support organisations. That discussion's yet to be finalised as well.
If you're willing to give all of it to the port, we'll buy a blimp, and we will advertise like crazy. Because that blimp, who doesn't notice a blimp? Come on.
Okay.
Someone spent their entire advertising budget, $2 million on the Super Bowl, and then didn't have the servers to handle the load.
There you go. Maybe not a blimp then. Okay.
That'd be signage we'd have to check in.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll take it under advisement.
Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Commissioner Briscoe, any other new business?
I have none.
Commissioner McCauley?
No, I recycled my notes. I have no idea what my new business was.
Hearing none, we are adjourned.